Somebody's walking into a restaurant today that I do the books for, and their server is happy because the direct deposit hit on time and they didn't have to talk to anybody about their check being incorrect. The small farm is happy because they just got their statement balance paid. The owners are happy because they're going to walk in and everything's going to be ready to go. And now someone's going to have a great meal tonight in Austin, and I just had a tiny little bit to play in it. But that means a lot.
You're listening to Season 2 of the Mies Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Sharkey, the founder and CEO of Mies, a culinary operating system for food professionals. On the show, we're going to talk to high performers in the food business, everything from chefs to CEOs, technologists, writers, investors, and more, about how they innovate and operate and how they consistently execute at a high level day after day. And I would really love it if you could drop us a 5-star review anywhere that you listen to your podcast. That could be Apple, that could be Spotify, it could be Google. I'm not picky. Anywhere works, but I really appreciate the support. And as always, I hope you enjoy the show. I looked at your background more before this, obviously.
Sure.
We talked a little bit before. I didn't realize, it's like 16 years as a manager in restaurants. So maybe more than that. It was a long time.
So, I'm from Oklahoma. Boomer Sooner.
I don't meet many people from Oklahoma. So.
It's a small state. Oklahoma City's smaller. I mean, it's growing. But yeah, so I graduated college with my degree in accounting from OU and came down to Austin. Had a good friend that I grew up with that needed a roommate. And it was like, yeah, Austin seems like a good place to go. It's, it's got some good swimming holes and it's kind of, some independent. What does Willie Nelson says when a redneck meets a hippie, they're an out. That's what makes them an outlaw. And so I knew I had the redneck part and then I wanted to explore the hippie part. So yeah, kind of a little outlaw Austin. And
how old were you when you moved there?
23, 22, around there.
Like 6 years ago?
Yeah, exactly. 2003. And, it's been interesting, right? So Austin has grown and changed tremendously in the last 25 years, 26 years. And so I came down here and this is part of the story, so I have to tell it. But so my grandparents owned a restaurant. And
in Oklahoma
City, called Pick's Fine Foods. It's where my parents met. My dad was a police officer and a line cook. So he would work the line and then he'd go work the graveyard shift for the police, the village police. My mom was the owner's daughter, right? Who would work in the restaurant. And so they knew each other. He's 10 years older. So it was very kind of, they didn't start dating until she was done with college, but really kind of knew of each other and I mean, met in that restaurant. Right. So my grandparents owned the restaurant and I, for whatever reason, kind of always fought against going to work in a restaurant. Right. My mom and dad would always be like, you'd love it. The connection with people, the fast pace, the critical thinking skills, all the things you need to be a good restaurant employee. I was like, no, that's y'all's thing. I'm not a restaurant guy or whatever. And so I finally, senior year of college, my brother had a lot of success and really enjoyed his time at the Applebee's near our house. And so to make extra money, I was like, all right, I'll go apply. My brother, the manager liked him and my brother had subsequently gone to college. So I was like, okay, well, I'll go introduce myself and started working at Applebee's and really loved waiting tables, really loved taking care of tables. And so when I moved to Austin, I transferred. Like I walked into the Applebee's at St. John's and I-35 and said, hey, I'm trained. I'm ready to go. And worked lunch shifts and bartended and, had the cowboy burger and did the whole deal. And through this group of friends, right, my good friend from growing up, and then he had made friends down here, and we kind of had some friends from college that were around, working on their law degrees or working on their MBAs at UT. one of my good friends had bartended at the restaurant. It was called Asti Trattoria. It's still here. It's at 43rd and Duval. And he was good friends with the chef. And so the chef, we'd all hang out. We'd go to swimming holes and, bluegrass concerts and all these.
What do you mean by swimming hole? Sorry, maybe I'm just not familiar with that.
Yeah, so around Austin, there's a lot of limestone, and there's also a lot of kind of reservoirs, and so like Barton Springs is a spring it's a spring fed, always 68 degrees, and they've made it. Barton's is a huge pool, but even out west, there's like Krause Springs, there's Hamilton Pool. So just all these natural pools of cold water. And so in Austin, right, like today it's 96, the high of 96. So it's like you need water. You need to get in cold water. And so it's just part of it. And I'll bring this up later. It does inform the restaurant world of Austin. Because when you think about it, so many people are out in their swimsuits and in their flip-flops and have done a trail run, and then they hop in the springs, and then it's like, okay, well, I'm going to go grab a bite to eat. So you're walking into a restaurant, maybe a little dirty, or a little, kind of a little casual. And so, I feel like that really does inform a lot of the way that people interact with the restaurant world here.
Yeah, I didn't realize there was that much swimming. Do you go swimming often?
I try to. Yeah. So like, Barton Springs is great. So I'm a big golfer, and there's a couple courses. And so it's like, go play 9 holes. I mean, if anybody comes, I'll regret saying this because Barton's can be busy, but there's something about jumping into that 68 degree water. It really does like chill your soul. Like it brings anything just way down. And I don't know, it's a spiritual place, right? I mean, the green belt, which kind of runs through town and has all the hiking trails. And, when it has water in the summer, early summer, or in the fall, man, that's just, you can just sit in the water and just let it run over you, and you're just chilling. And it just makes, I don't know. I mean, like, you can just see and you understand where it's like, this has been a kind of a spiritual place forever. Native Americans, Onion Creek. There are just so many places here, green spaces. And I think that's always been part of the intrigue, right? Is that you've got this city that's got this life. You've got a university that has all this vibrancy. It's the capital. So you've got all the kind of political maneuverings. And then you're 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes away from, we're right at the edge of the hill country. So the hill country starts, and the ranch, just so you can kind of get a little bit of both. And I think that's always been the part of the secret sauce.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so anyways, this chef was like, what are you doing at Applebee's? Like, you need to come over here and work for this husband and wife. And I did. And I didn't, I wasn't a foodie or, into wine or even coffee like I am now. Like, this place had a weekly wine tasting where both the wine director and or the distributors would come in, and we'd do wine education. And so like, I just learned and tasted and had good food, and, learned how to make the espresso the right way, and loved the coffee. And it just kind of, it just grew and grew and grew. And, I was bussing tables and then waiting on lunch. And then, you always want to get the backroom section where all the Sons of Bacchus was this name of this local wine drinking club. And so the cool thing about Asti is if you have a wine and beer license in Texas, you can just do a cork fee. You can't bring in wine if you got liquor. I don't know if it's like that around other states, but in Texas, it's if you have liquor, you can't bring in your own wine or any of your own. But if you have wine and beer, you can bring in your own wine. So these guys had cellars and all this Italian, Sassicaia and, all these Barolos and they'd come in and you would basically, we'd put a 12 top together. And if you had that table, that was your night, right? Like that's the only table you're going to have tonight. So it's like breadsticks and white pizzas and fried calamari and the special, and then the lamb ossobuco with saffron risotto. And they were just pairing and tasting and sharing. And yeah, they always took good care of you on the tip. But what they also would do once they really got to know you is to pour you some and you'd have a sip and you'd let it sit till after shift. And so you're drinking, Gaia, you're drinking. And some of this stuff was just insane, years and vintages that you'd never have, you'd never be exposed to. And so it just opens up the world, right? It's just like, oh my. So it's like, I'm reading, I'm coming in early to shifts and like reading Vino Italiano and the Wine Bible and all those things that just like, give me the content, give me the information. But fortunately too, because it was an independent restaurant, I had my degree in accounting. I wanted to use my degree. And so I noticed that, we were closing the night. We were just kind of putting all the sales data, the top line sales data on, we write it in, add it up, balance the drawer. And it was on a clipboard. I was like, can I take this and build a access database and so I made a little form and I was just keying in historical data, just looking at seasonality and looking at nights of the week and looking at special event data, right? And and of course I was doing it on my own time, which was fine at the time because it's like, well, I want to do it. I want to learn. And that of course got me a seat at the table to help manage that restaurant. And then they started talking about another restaurant and I was all in. I was drinking the Kool-Aid. I was like, yeah, I want to do this. I want to help you guys. I want to help with the pro forma. I want to help write the business plan. I want to do the research studies. I want to drive to Houston and eat tapas. And so it was a Mediterranean restaurant called Fino. And I think just from my passion and then maybe also some of my skill, I would hope, they were like, yeah, you'll be the GM. And I was like, okay. Like I've never I've never interviewed anybody before for a job. I've never fired anybody for a job. I've never put together training manuals. I've never done any of this. But because we were this family, this tight-knit group, and we all trusted each other, they showed a lot of confidence in me to give me that opportunity.
What did you do to learn all of those things? And I guess maybe just generally speaking, what's your process for learning new things?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I definitely read a few books, right? Definitely kind of went to, the one that came on maybe a year and a half in, I can't remember when Setting the Table came out, but obviously Danny Meyer's book is huge. That was the first one for my career that really, and I kind of identified with him too, right? He's from St. Louis. There's like Midwestern heartland kind of way of being, kind of taking care of people, making them happy. But he also, at the peak, right? New York City, like top, if you can make it there, right? And so that was kind of inspiring. But the Austin community was it's always been supportive. Like that was the other thing too, is like once you kind of open your eyes, you see it's like independent business.
So many of them.
Entrepreneur. And I also had this so another good friend from my high school who started freshman year, he was from Austin, but his dad was in Oklahoma City for work. And his stepdad was a CPA and here in Austin, and did not know this at the time, but come to find out he was the CPA of Asti, the restaurant that I started working at.
Oh, that's so funny.
And so I reached out to him and he kind of became a mentor in a lot of ways for me because he had been doing restaurant tax returns for 45 years in Austin. So he knew all the players. He knew every owner. He had seen the data and he had, advised them for decades. I just started asking questions and, my buddy Clint would come to town and we'd go over to Gary's and Suzanne's and we'd cook out and talk. And we'd usually talk about Texas football and OU football and Texas baseball, but every so often I kind of bend his ear for, what are you seeing? This is what I'm seeing in my restaurant. What do you think about this? What do we think about the economy, right? Both macro and micro. Like what are some of the inputs that people are struggling with, things like that. So that helped a lot. And then Emma and Lisa, the owners, helped me a lot. Like I said, they continued. We had our manager meetings. They had come from kind of a family tree, right? Every restaurant's got a family tree. He had worked for Robert Del Grande in Houston. She had worked a couple places in Boston. They were chefs themselves, chef owners. And so numbers were always part of our meetings. And so we ran prime costs.
I mean, Brad, I wanted to anchor a lot of today on selfishly asking some questions. And also I think everybody will get value out of it. But you were just talking about something that I still haven't wrapped my head around, which is like, there's accounting, there's finance, and then there's CPA taxes.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like discretely different things. And I think almost always I'm asking a question to my accountant that's a finance question or a tax question.
Yeah.
And vice versa.
Yeah.
And how separated are they? And also, I mean, we're going to talk about Genuine Article as well, but like, do they have to be separated?
It's interesting. I observed this in college and I continue to observe it in business school, kind of when I watch or talk to people that are going through business school. I think that there comes a time, it's usually around sophomore, junior year, where you've taken finance classes, you've taken accounting classes, and there's this road where the accountants take the off ramp and say, I'm not interested in kind of the more creative modes of making money happen. I'm interested in making sure that what the finance guys and gals are doing is being organized to make sound decisions and giving the feedback. And so I think that sometimes it's a way of learning and it's a way of being that you kind of drift towards one or the other. And then obviously with CPAs, you just go further into the accounting world to make sure that you have the certifications and really the deep down kind of like the reason that I went with accounting was at the time, this will date me. One of the things that was said in like my 101 class was like, it's the last self-regulated profession in the United States.
What does that mean?
Meaning accountants took care of accountants, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
The AICPA and GAAP, there were organizations where we made the rules for ourselves and we all agreed on them. And those were the rules.
How old is GAAP?
Oh man, I don't know. Well, all you need to know is that was maybe freshman year. And then sophomore year, my case study was Enron.
Oh, okay.
Which really that was one of those areas where the finance and the accounting were working together to do certain things that were not to spec, that were more manipulative in terms of the way that they were showing certain assets and liabilities and presenting to the market and using that there wasn't that firewall, right?
Yeah.
It's just like, and there needs to be, especially with the big organizations, there has to be that firewall for protections of both shareholder value and interests. But then also it's like the finance folks need to be told like, no, we can't do it that way. Like that's actually not legal, or not proper. That's where I think it's at the bigger organizations. I know it's at the bigger organizations where maybe there's a little bit more friction. So along the way, I think I realized, because I know that I felt this way. I don't know if you felt this way, but when you're young, you're out of college, you want to change the world, right? You want to make an impact. You want to make things better. It's like my dad would, leave it better than he found it, right? I think along the way, and my grandparents who owned the restaurant passed away young, sadly. See, let me do some math here. I was probably 7 or 8 when my grandfather died of leukemia. That same year, my grandmother had a stroke and was paralyzed on her left side.
Mm.
She moved in with us and lived with us. We built onto our house. My parents did, and took care of her. I think she passed when I was 10 or 12. So in a lot of ways, I never got to share my passion for restaurants with them, which would have been neat to be able to do, but it didn't work out that way.
Yeah.
But I think along the way, I remember the night I was hanging out with Chef, who ended up becoming my roommate. It just dawned on me as like, in a lot of ways, I'm exactly where I was supposed to be. I went to college, I got my degree in business. I'm working for a husband and wife. The husband is gregarious and kind of the mayor, and everybody knows his name, which is a lot like my grandfather. Lisa was very meticulous. She was the pastry chef. She was a numbers hawk. Every payroll, every overtime hour, every prime, every food cost number, every cup of tea, the lighting. I think one of the reasons why Lisa started liking me so much is because I would adjust the lighting throughout the evening to make sure that it was matching the sunset and that there wasn't that disruptive fade. We'd always joke about it because she'd come and change my lighting. I was like, no, this is where, we would argue about where the lights were or the music, how loud the music was, right? Those kind of ambiance touches that are happening behind the scenes. So it dawned on me. It's like, you know what? It's like, I'm kind of where I am, I'm kind of where I'm supposed to be. Like I'm kind of getting some of what maybe, I would have gotten if my grandparents were still around. So it really became part of my identity and something that I could really kind of tap into their memory and say, yeah, you got your own journey, but you're in it and it's great. And it's so, I say this to my clients a lot, and it kind of talks to the finance thing and the numbers thing. It's important to know what the extrinsic rewards are in the restaurant, right? Are we making money? Are we sustainable? Can we give a long tenured employee a raise? Can we introduce a 401k into our expense base? But the intrinsic rewards are there every night, every shift. There's somebody walking in that's had a bad day. There's somebody that's walking in to celebrate. There's somebody walking in to meet an old friend. And you get the privilege of making sure that the coffee was made right and that the forks are clean, right? And that the position numbers are right. So you're not interrupting their conversation. So and I'm waxing philosophical, which any of my former employees would tell you I would do at lineup quite often. But I do believe that this table, the table in front of you, the table between 2 people, 4 people, 8 people is a spiritual place. And taking care of it properly is your job, but it's also your opportunity to let life happen. And so what I figured out was if I take care of my section the right way every night, then maybe I can take care of the restaurant every night. And if I can take care of the restaurant every night, maybe I can take care of 2 restaurants every night. And if I can take care of 2 restaurants every night, maybe I can take care of 5 restaurants every night. And eventually I had to change how I engaged with that taking care. But for me, the bookkeeping piece and the back end office piece was like, I've got a role to play. My role is to make sure that payroll is timely and accurate for my clients. My role is to give them the previous 4-week P&L balance sheet, statement of cash flows reporting every 4 weeks, as close to the end of the period as we can, close the books with accuracy and present it to them so that they're making informed, confident decisions about their business on a regular basis. And if I can do that for, now over 100 entities, that's a pretty amazing way, because I know at the end of that life cycle, somebody's walking into a restaurant today that I do the books for, and their server is happy because the direct deposit hit on time and they didn't have to talk to anybody about their check being incorrect. The small farm is happy because they just got their statement balance paid. The owners are happy because they're going to walk in and everything's going to be ready to go. And now someone's going to have a great meal tonight in Austin. And I just had a tiny little bit to play in it. But that means a lot.
I think probably the first thing that I noticed when I first met you that intrigued me was one, you don't meet a lot of accountant finance folks that even have like restaurant experience, let alone generally care and give a shit about it. And
I've always said is that if I ever write my restaurant memoir, it's going to be called Cooking with Gas. And GAS is the acronym for give a shit.
Yeah.
If you care in a restaurant, you can be successful. But you have to care about the people in the building.
It has to translate, I'm sure, to the work that you do with Genuine Article, your business, because if you just look at a P&L, absent of the context of the business, you tend to make very sort of short-sighted or maybe myopic decisions because you're just looking at a bunch of rows of a spreadsheet. But if you do generally understand the people and the business model and the meaning behind some of these things, you can really have a huge impact.
And I think that's the other thing about accounting that I love, right? Is that at the end of the day, it has to be balanced and every penny has to be tracked. And there is a lot of value in the cold calculus, right? I think that some of my clients, former clients, current clients would argue that maybe sometimes I'm too passionate about certain line items and they want more. What's this trend line or whatever? And I'm working on that, right? To kind of, it's a balance. And I've learned to grow and really make sure that, it is their business at the end of the day. It is their decision. My core competency role is to give them accurate and timely information that is transparent. Now, when they ask me for a little bit more, I love giving a little bit more. And, and it's, sometimes it's, at this point, it's almost humorous because some people be like, oh, here goes Brian again. To speak to that though, and that's why I think that the conversation is so important, is because yes, you're a concept, right? And you want to do a certain thing. Okay, well, it's nice to know that that's the new project, the new menu offering, the new happy hour, the new schedule format, and let's track it, right? So let's put some tracking in place so that we can measure it and judge its success financially. Not just, and so you have to have the context where it's like, well, we just started this happy hour. And it's like, yeah, well, in Austin, it's like, you don't start a happy hour in the summer because nobody's in Austin in the summer. It's too hot. Anybody that has disposable income that eats out a lot tends to leave. And I was telling you this in a previous conversation. They don't leave for a 1 week vacation. Some of these folks that are really restaurant supporters are gone for a month because they have a second home or they have and that's crazy to think about, but good for them. But that's a customer base that isn't here. And I've seen it over the last, 20 summers in Austin where it's a different animal. And so our seasonality is, and you would think that the fall would be great, right? It's like, oh, it's so nice. And everybody comes here for football games and everything else. But you know what? Football is a big competitor because Texas high school football on Friday nights is a thing. And then Saturday night Texas football is a thing. And then Dallas Cowboys football on Sunday is a thing. And if they play on a Monday night, it's a thing. And so, you're competing against some pretty big entertainment dollars. And when you're at those events, you're eating hot dogs, you're eating tacos, you're eating the concessions. You're not saying, okay, well, after the game, we're going to meet up with a 12 top and have, 3 courses at Olamé, or, we're not going to pop into Lenoir and eat in a garden. It just doesn't happen. And then, so there's this big tranche between special occasion or kind of what we would consider fine dining. And I've told you this too. It's like our fine dining restaurants are pretty casual because they have to be. I mean, I think there's only I mean, there's less than a handful of restaurants that would. I don't know that there is a dress code at any restaurant, to be honest. Maybe Jeffrey's, you have to wear a coat, maybe. But I mean, you can go around. It'd be an interesting, now that Michelin is here and looking around Austin, I don't even know how many places have white tablecloths. It is just not a thing. And I think so much of that is because that's just not the way that the city lives. I mean,
Yeah.
And it used to be, when I moved here, it did seem like Austin is informed a lot by Dallas and Houston and San Antonio and their cultures. And it used to be, economically, Austin was kind of like Texas's playground, where a bunch of people would come to Dallas or from Houston on the weekends and hang out in Austin. But how many more independent, creative, fantastic restaurants have popped up in Houston and Dallas and San Antonio? I mean, you got Beard Award winners all over Texas now. It has its own category. So it used to be that Austin was like the cultural little hub, and everybody would come here to seek out the weird and the different. Well, there's a lot more weird and different in these big cities than there used to be, which is great. And we've grown, my company's grown with that, right? Like we service, we've got a couple restaurants in Detroit, bars and restaurants in Detroit that we work with. And those guys are great. And it's a totally different seasonality, a totally different customer base. And it's fun to have those conversations with them and learn about Detroit bars. But, they've got the Detroit Lions challenges and the University of Michigan challenges. But it's all that, the evolution of the industry, I think, since I've been at it is, all the reality shows, all the kind of, chef as rock star restaurants and bars are just part of our entertainment culture now. And they're seen as part entertainment, part nourishment, and everything in between. And so it's really, really interesting now, because there is kind of this like spectrum of client that, have you seen Cosm? This big planetarium, like 180 degree. There's one in LA and there's one in Dallas right now. Mm-hmm. And it puts you in like on the field, or it puts you in the courtside. And it's almost like being at the Sphere in Vegas, right? It's this totally immersive thing, but the seats are tables and it's food and beverage. And it's like $200 a ticket to get in, plus all what you're consuming. And it really puts you at the event. And it's feeding this idea that like, and it's happening in commercial real estate, right? With the death of retail, or the challenges that retail has now with, you can get everything online. The highest, best use of commercial real estate right now has to be entertainment and hospitality. And every single new spot, even if it's a pickleball court, has a food truck and a bar. And, and it's like, are they managing their food costs? Are they managing their liquor costs? Is it a profit center? Is it necessary to be a profit center? Is it a break-even scenario? I mean, that's the thing. It's like, think about it. It's like, if you're making so much money off of pickleball rentals, you could run the coolest food truck in the world, because you don't have to make money off of it. It could be 100% prime cost.
Yeah. This show is brought to you by, you guessed it, Meez. Meez helps thousands of restaurants and food service businesses all over the world build profitable menus and scale their business successfully. If you're looking to organize your recipe IP and train your team to put out consistent product every day in less time than ever before, then Meez is just for you. And you can transform all those old Google Docs and Word docs and PDFs and spreadsheets and Google Sheets into dynamic, actionable recipes in Meez in lightning speed. Plus, stop all that manual work of processing invoices, because Meez will digitize all your purchases automatically. And there's a built-in database of ingredient yields, prep yields, and unit of measure conversions for every ingredient, which means you're going to get laser-accurate food costs in a fraction of the time. Visit www.getmeez.com. That's GETMEEZ.com to learn more. And check out the show notes moving forward, because we're going to be adding promotions and discount codes so that all of you lovely and brilliant Meez podcast listeners get a sweet deal on Meez. I was having this conversation with the perception of the cost of food. There is this sort of parallel where if you go to a spa, you spend $150 and that's just to be in the spa. You just get to be in that place. And then anything else you're paying for the juices and food and things like that. In the restaurant, you're just not paying for that experience. You're only paying for the food.
Right.
But oftentimes there is this really incredible experience. I think that is, I think there is a lot of opportunity there if we can just sort of communicate the experience that you're getting, and that be a cost, and the food is another element.
I mean, that's how Talk was born, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was Kakanas and Next were selling the experience, and they needed a ticketing platform that they could work. And so they built one. And now it's a reservation system, and now it's being used for private events, and it's got all these other things. Now it's owned by Amex, like every good tech solution in the space usually does, is they eventually get acquired and they become just part of the ecosystem.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to make sure we talk about GA, Genuine Article, and also just getting a bunch of like tactical advice from you.
Sure.
Because, I mean, obviously you've run restaurants for decades, and now you oversee over 100, restaurants in terms of the finance and other things. So first of all, in terms of the other things, what does Genuine Article do? I know obviously you guys are doing accounting.
The core competency is bookkeeping, everything but the end of your tax return for restaurants, bars, coffee shops. So what we focus on is just, the nitty gritty, the blocking and tackling, as I call it. Right. And actually I did want to bring this up because it's like, I was thinking about some of the clients that we inherited, or sometimes, a lot of the CPAs have bookkeeping services within their firms. But CPAs have they cast a broad net of all businesses, auto repair, general contracting. There is one way to do books, and it's the cash basis accounting, where whatever hits your bank account that day goes into your P&L or balance sheet that day. And it doesn't have a lot of granularity or specificity. And they send you the report, and you look at it, and it has percentages, and it has what it does. And, if you've got a healthy business and you're making money, you could probably run it that way, but that's not the way you need to be running. In my opinion, it's not the best way. I know it's not the best way to be running restaurants and bars and coffee shops, because we have terms with all of our vendors. We have, we have inventory that we're trying to manage effectively. We have pay periods that don't line up. I mean, that first restaurant I managed was a semi-monthly payroll, which, bridges different work weeks. And, I don't know how many conversations I had with, line cooks and dishwashers, any hourly employee saying, my OT is not on this check. And it's like, well, you actually went into OT because you get paid 10 days, 7 days later. It's like, well, you didn't go into OT in this week. You actually went into OT the next week. So it just comes back to, for me, I really just it's like the matching principle is key. Matching the expense to the revenue that it created or didn't create. Matching the payroll to the Friday and Saturday that they were actually working. Matching the invoice, matching that, it's like, we didn't spend $5,000 with, this broadline vendor on Tuesday. We spent $2,000 last 2 weeks ago, and we spent $3,000 this week. And the $5,000 hit in week 3 because we're on net 7. So it's like, no, it was the $2,000 that ran the $10,000 in sales 2 weeks ago. And so, just the accrual versus cash basis accounting is a huge one. Marking all the invoice, marking every expense on the day in which it was incurred and received, so it matches the sales from the subsequent days. That right there is like linchpin number one in making a decision that's accurate about your food costs, your alcohol costs, and your labor.
Yeah. So it sounds like, obviously in addition to the accounting, bookkeeping, there's all this sort of just finance and strategy that you guys are doing. So maybe if it's okay, we'll just talk a little bit about some of those things that could be nebulous to others, or just to get your thoughts on. You've taken on restaurants that are already operating and you start new ones as well.
Mm-hmm.
Two questions really. Like one is when you first start, like what are some like the obvious opportunities or mistakes that you see that like most folks probably are doing that have the biggest impact right away?
Honestly, where I start both with like a pro forma and with an assessment of existing businesses in the space is understanding. One of the ones that's become really kind of valuable is occupancy costs relative to revenue. Understanding, is the space creating the sales in a range, right? So I always like to see, and I'll go back and then I'll go forward real quick. The USAR, Uniform System of Accounting for Restaurants, is a chart of accounts that was put out by the National Restaurant Association and continues to be, it actually hasn't been updated in a while, nor that does it need to, but it basically gives you every bucket that a restaurant, bar, coffee shop may end up having to put something in that are specific to the industry. And they have specific codes, right? So what I get to do is I know that 7518 is credit card fees. So any restaurant P&L that I look at, first thing we do is make sure that they have everything's organized in the chart. And if they're not using that chart, we adopt that chart for them. Because what it does is it puts, then I know that when I'm going through general and admin expenses, 7518 is in there and credit card fees are part of the general and administrative percentage. And I've just kind of over time really started to see the restaurants that do well, this is this percentage area. And then I go and look at the dollars and I say, okay, is it higher than last year? Is it higher than last period? Period accounting is another one. Like we run 445, right? We run 13 periods a year. So that line up exactly with the end of the pay period, whether that be weekly, bi-weekly, Wednesday to Tuesday, or Monday to Sunday. I love period accounting for restaurants because I never liked doing an inventory on the end of the month on a Friday night after working a double. And I was beat down and tired and I didn't want to be counting, back stock. So I love the fact that every 4 weeks, I can tell chef or wine manager or bar manager that, hey, you guys are dark on Monday. The period just closed on Sunday. Get up, go get your coffee, come in, clear-headed, take your inventory accurately, calmly, do a little bit of admin work, send it off to us. It's valued. Let's go. And the other thing about that is every of those periods has the same number of Fridays and the same number of Saturdays and the same number of Sundays, which, we all know this. The weekends are busier than Tuesday night. And so, those are some of the adjustments that I will make right away. And what that does is it just brings all the matching in tight. And now we know where we are. Now we're cooking with gas, right? Now we know, okay, is our menu priced right? Are we paying too much in management wages relative to hourly? Are we overmanaged? Are we undermanaged? Are we, so these are all these metrics that I kind of go down and check along the way. Occupancy is a big one. Is our rent and triple nets between 6 to 10% of our revenue? Because if it's at 18%, we're going to have a hard time. We better be real busy, and that contribution margin may be real. That gross profit better be pretty high after we pay for the product and the people if we're running that, and so it's not that it can't be done. It's just, it's like, okay, so what are our challenges, right? So one of the things that I'll see is like, if we're close, right? It's like, if we're at 11% occupancy costs for the previous year, a slight price increase is going to get us into a range where, and it always goes back to the way it was taught to me, and it hasn't changed. It's where the puzzle pieces fit have moved around a little bit, but, the 30, 30, 30, and you make 10, right? 30% on product, 30% on labor, and 30% on everything else, and you make 10%. And that should always be a target relative, it's, and it's sometimes it's not much, right? Sometimes 10% can only be $1,500, but it's still $1,500 in the black, and we're still moving forward. And and then some concepts, right? The types of concepts have different things, right? So it's like I know through over time that I know what barbecue protein cogs are going to be higher for barbecue places and burger places. Labor cogs are maybe lower than the 30% because of the nature of making pizza, right? So, the great thing about pizza, right? You got these huge deck ovens or whatever. It's all prepped. They all go in at the same time. They all go out at the same time. It's not broken up by station. You're not handing off, it's just a in and out situation. You can sell a lot more pizza in an hour than, a seared scallop dish. It's just the nature of prep time, the nature of accuracy of cook time. That, you've got good ovens that hold temp. I mean, you crank out, and that's why, the first question I usually ask anybody about their concept that they want to either open or bring to me is like, is it pizza or not? Because if it's pizza, we've got and pizza's got all the things, right? It's low barrier to entry. You can prep a lot of it and have a lot of, available to sell. And like I said, it's easy to make and the customer gets it, right? You're not educating the customer on what pizza is, maybe a style, right? But even that's evolved where it's like, 2-year-olds love pizza, 92-year-olds love pizza, right? It's like, it's just one of those things that you just don't have to do as much. It's not as high touch. Barbecues kind of become that more as, the Aaron Franklins of the world have educated and the barbecue nerds, Tex-Mex, there's all these concepts that kind of, don't have as many hurdles for the customer to jump over to access and understand. And I'll be honest, that's sometimes you'll see it. It's like, sometimes it's just a menu change. Sometimes you need to introduce some more accessible, relatable items because, that's the whole choice fatigue, right? It's like, people make choices all the time, every day, for all things. Some nights you just want to go into a restaurant and it doesn't need to be a geography quiz and it doesn't need to be a culinary quiz and it doesn't need to be, it just needs to be like, okay, they've got a pork chop, they've got, a bone-in pork chop that's grilled with, a side and a sauce. I'll take it. But going back to the P&L, right? And so that's the operational piece. Those metrics is kind of where we start, getting them matched up, getting them what's accurate and kind of responsive to the sales as we can.
You mentioned a few things there. Like, so generally speaking, I know there's like a rule of thumb of like a 60% prime cost.
Sure.
But, when you have something like barbecue or pizza, even there's a really high prep labor cost to those things. So, so maybe your cogs is your cogs lower, your labor is higher. Are there instances when you're okay with higher than a 60% prime cost? And if so, like, how do you help like adjust in the OpEx if prime costs are just going to be higher?
So, we talk about it, right? So, one of the things we do in addition to the actual bookkeeping is, this is where kind of the fractional CFO or the consultant, I meet with clients every 4 weeks and review these reports with them. And we have these conversations. And so if I see that, okay, we hit 65% primes, right? We were 2% over on labor and we were 2 points high on food costs. Then we get to 4 points someplace else. And so you start to understand that between direct operating expenses, general and administrative expenses, and occupancy, right? Let's just say that those are the 3 big buckets of 10, 10, 10. Oh, okay. Well, come to find out, we can't, and marketing's in there. Like, oh, our marketing is too high. That is the thing that or not to pick on Open Table, but this reservation system, this computer data process subscription is expensive relative to our metrics? Is there another, solution out there that, maybe can help us offer a similar, and that's the argument, right? They would say, their competitors don't offer a similar product. They offer a lesser product. But the point there is it's like, yeah, but your concept maybe needs to be on a different platform because the juice isn't worth the squeeze. And we need those 2 points if we're going to keep running at 65. Those controllables, right? We have got to be more efficient with our cleaning supplies and our linen costs. Our linen costs are, half a point too high. Are we checking our PARs? Are we keeping them? Are we looking at that invoice every time and saying, no, we need difference? Or it's, paper and packaging is huge, especially post COVID, right? It's like, well, how are we packaging these products to go? Are we wasting them? Are they branded? Are they not branded? All those kind of decisions come in to where it's like, hey, we need a half point here and a half point here and a half point here because we are comfortable with, and it is part of our mission for that 1.5% prime cost to be at 61.5. Like, okay, fine. Let's go find it then. Like, let's get to 10. And then when you're busy, you get to 15. And then when you're slow, maybe you do 5. But again, you kind of ride that, if we can do that. And, I've seen, I've got some bars, that are great and busy and have great volume. I mean, I've seen 33, 35% profits. Like, it's out there, but it's not common. That's the big, I think that's the big kind of like, it's the disconnect, both with some employees, right? Who feel like, man, I'm working at this busy restaurant. Why can't they give me a raise? They've got to be making tons of money. But they don't know what rent is. They don't know that utilities are at 3.5% because the AC is inefficient. They don't know that the makeup air between the vent hood and the HVAC has been a problem from day one because it was a second gen space that wasn't engineered properly. All the decisions you make in opening a restaurant, raising money, they were underfunded. They're servicing debt. They had to go take out a line of credit and they're paying 9% on it. Like, all those things hit below the line. And it just doesn't free up ownership to just say, oh yeah, yeah, you're right. We'll pay you more. We'll raise our prices and pay you more. Sometimes when prices are going up, they're going up because the below the line expenses are going up. And like you said about the environment, that's not on the menu. Nobody pays for the carpet. Nobody pays for the carpet cleaning. Nobody pays for the paint. Nobody paid, like the business pays for those things. And they have to manage that between taking care of their people, taking care of their purveyors, and then taking care of the guests. And like, that's the push and pull that happens every day. And sometimes it just gets written off on a Yelp review as it was too expensive for yeast rolls. And it's like, you don't know. And that's what I said. I posted that the other day. I saw some, not even a client. I saw somebody that I respect a lot, Nathan and Sarah Hurd, who run foreign and domestic.
Oh, yeah.
I used to work with Ned and Jody when they had foreign and domestic. And then Nathan was an employee who bought the business from them. And they've got another place out in Lockhart. I think Chef posted that, they had a 4-star review and the one negative was the cost of the rolls. And she, they explained the butter and the flour and all the things that go into it. And I've always said this, good food from good people costs good money.
I just can't think of another business where you can go spend time somewhere and that itself doesn't cost money.
Well,
you know what I mean?
And so that,
and then on top there's
speaking of metrics, right? That's another metric. Cornell, the hospitality management school at Cornell, had these great newsletters when I was managing. And they had some class, some content was getting out there. And there was a period of time before I started the business where I thought about going to school and going to Cornell and trying to learn, like Andy from The Office. But revenue per seat hour, right? How many seats do you have? How many hours are you open? What's your revenue? that was an interesting metric that I'll always look at sometimes to say, like, are we getting the revenue out of these hours that these seats are open? Just like tickets, right? That seat costs X. Are we making X on that seat? And yeah, I mean, there's been some concepts that have tried it, right? I mean, that's what a cover charge is. That's what a ticket is to a dinner. That's where pre-fee and some of those things are really good for margin. And when you see, just speaking to general restaurant fans, like when you see dinner series, when you see, guest chefs, when you see pop-ups, what they're trying to do is they're trying to keep you engaged in a different way because they know that you're a guest that has been in on a regular basis, and they want to share with you the kind of, they want to take the constrictions off for a night and have some fun. And, it may be a little bit more than your normal dining experience there, but it's like, go support it. Those are the things that that keep the great restaurant daily going.
Yeah. Back to your point about just going through the below the line things. I think just that exercise is, I mean, I wish I had my early days in restaurants. I wish I had someone going through that exercise every week. That alone of just looking at the numbers often enough.
One of the things you said is, it's like you hear the word EBITDA all the time, right? Or used before income tax and depreciation and amortization. P&Ls sometimes will be presented with non-cash expenses, things that actually don't affect cash, but are recognizing previous business activity. And you need to account for it because your asset values are going down, and there's the tax side of that, which is important and you have to do, right? So all your expenses, all your big leasehold improvements and furniture and fixtures and equipment, right? You can't just for a while now, you've had bonus depreciation. So a lot of new restaurants get to write off a much bigger amount on their tax return and treat it as, hey, this was part of this year's, profit and loss. But over time, you do have to recognize some, the depreciation or the amortization of your assets. Those aren't controllable by the operations. Those are just things that are part of the P&L. And so that's why EBITDA for restaurants is so important, because there's net income and then there's net operating income, right? The NOI is also another term for EBITDA, where it's like, that's the number that your business made in profit or loss for whatever period of time you're looking for. And for me, the most important thing, and this is the P&L, that's where I spend a lot of time with clients, because that is the day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month kind of report that gives them feedback. But taking that net income number onto the statement of cash flows and looking at the balance sheet and understanding that, yes, we made $25,000 this period, but we had a bad summer, and our accounts payable over the last 12 weeks has grown from $10K of what we owed our vendors. We've had to pay some invoices late, or we're having trouble keeping up, or we overordered. We owe our vendors $10K more than we did 3 months ago. We're going to pay that down now because we just made the money. So you start to understand the cash flow and how, the biggest problem that I see for a lot of restaurateurs is that they manage their business from their bank account. The amount of money in your bank account, especially when you factor in, liabilities and credit cards, potentially health insurance, accrued tips, right? I mean, think about this. Like, if you pay out your employees on tips, on their paycheck, tips on paychecks, right? You're holding on to those tip dollars. They're part of your credit card batch. So, that's not your money, right? So it's like, really, if you just look at a number on a screen on your phone and say, what's my bank account out today? Oh man, we're at $75,000 today in the bank account. Let's go buy a new knives for the kitchen. It's like, well, no, 20 of that is state taxes, and you've got a payroll that's accruing that you're going to have to clear. So.
And it goes the other way too. If you amortize something that you paid annually, and,
right.
You had $30,000 expense this month, but it's actually
That's right.
Covering the next 12 months.
Right. That's right. You did. Yeah. Yeah. It's like, no, actually, we did have the cash and we did we did improve the patio, right? We put in a misting system and we bought all new patio tables, and that $15,000 is gone. But the useful life of it is going to live hopefully for, 18, 24 months. And we're not going to have to be buying one chair at a time. And we're not going to have to be renting heaters because we bought a new heating system for the patio. So making those choices at the right time when, and let's be honest, the most important decision that you got to be making usually on the cash flow statement is, who do we owe money to? Our investors, the bank? Do we want to pay down the principal balance of a line of credit? Do we want to make a distribution because we haven't made one in a year and our investors are, kind of not meeting our targets, and we kind of, it's like, yeah. And that's the other piece that we try to do is we try to help with some of the investor relations stuff as well, right? Where it's like the most important thing for restaurant investors, and it's a challenge, but is communication, regular communication, good, bad, or ugly. If somebody is invested in your restaurant, at least quarterly, you need to let them know how it's going. It'll lower the temperature so much. Even if it's not working, you have to say that. Like, we had a really bad quarter. People were down. We're working on it. Maybe invite them into dinner to get some feedback, right? I mean, these are the people that believed in you. These are the people that wanted you to succeed. And sometimes people get so anxious and nervous about sending a bad report. And it's like, no, that's exactly when you need to lean in and send the bad report. These are your former coworkers, or these are your grandparents, or whatever. Like, these are the people that know you. And so they're, if you haven't seen them in a while and you're nervous to tell them that that the business lost, 10% over the last quarter, I would say that, kind of get over it, communicate.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I tend to be overly communicative and super communicative with my investors, mostly because even if most of it is good, they're vested. When they hear the bad, they're going to want to help a lot more than someone else because they don't want to be bad.
Well, and then that's the other thing too, is like, the challenge there is like, if you go bad, now all of a sudden you're presenting a real turd that, jars them and causes all sorts of more friction. So but all those reports matter, right? And understanding them matters. And that's where, I really think that I've been fortunate enough, because a lot of people have trusted me and shared their information with me, that I get to see a pretty broad spectrum, definitely in Austin, but even around the country, of flows and ways of tackling things and it's like, there's no proprietary thing that I of course would never share anything like I don't have recipes or anything like that. Like, but I do have, I've got my own recipe, I suppose, where things like this work. Have you thought about this, within your context, right? Have you thought about, I don't know, the one I always go to is, the, Rivers Happy Hour, or, I mean, Lenoir has a really cool thing, right? The community supported restaurant. The CSRs. I mean, I always feel like, it's like, if you've got a really good email database and a good social media following, it's like nothing is preventing you from a small business from being your own tiny little Groupon. Like, you got to be careful about what that percentage discount is. You got to be careful about, the real cost of that. But that's the other thing about discounting anything in the restaurant business, is that, managing your discounts matters, right? It's like that 3 to 5% range matters on both sides, right? If you're giving away 10% a night, that's too much, But if you're only giving away 2%, well, let's maybe figure out a way, because the true cost of that, right? It's a dollar value sales wise, because it's going through the POS. But the true cost of that product, if it's there is some margin there to play with. So the cash isn't as expensive to give, but you've got to make sure that value is felt and perceived. So that's always a fun way to kind of, engage with customers and see if you can't kind of hook them in a new way and get them excited about a new product. So
Yeah.
promotions are always huge. And I think that, the cool thing about social media is that you get to be yourself, right? You get to tell your story. You get to make it, authentic and real.
It's cool. Well, just forward looking, I don't know if you think about this at all, but like, I know this is somewhat cliche, but do you have thoughts on how things are changing, maybe specifically if you're leveraging any AI right now or any sort of like, machine learning or predictive analytics to sort of amplify what you're doing?
Yes, yes, and yes, right? It's like, we're working with Mies. I think one of the things that I always liked and has been helpful to my growth was any tech in the space. I've always tried to research and understand myself as a user. Because again, one of the biggest kind of like, ceilings, or one of the hardest things for restaurant owners, especially independent restaurant owners, is they don't have a deep bench, and they don't have time. They're too busy just trying to get ready for service. And so I've always felt like one of the things that I can do is take a demo and see if it's a better solution than another solution, and then try and harness it, right? Like for me, one of my mission statements is giving the independent restaurant the power of the group, right? Because groups have enough top line revenue to have a full-time CFO and full-time CTO and the whole C-suite can be hired.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're all the C-suite, when you're a C-suite of one, anywhere that I can help take away some pain and have some information and context is valuable.
The semblance of like outsourced, whatever it is, services, CFO. I mean, I remember running a very large restaurant group before this, really large. And we had, we moved to outsource accounting actually. And I think it's a huge benefit because you can get this economy of scale of knowledge and information, and to your point, like bandwidth of being able to look at other opportunities.
And I'll tell you the biggest advantage, in my opinion. This is kind of, I guess, part of my sales pitch. So forgive me, listeners, for selling myself a little bit. But, I'd like to think that me and my team aren't going anywhere. And we're not asking, for health insurance or 401k. Like we're a little bit more contained. And the biggest thing is the institutional knowledge loss sometimes in a small organization. Yeah. So you've got a close partner who acts as CFO, but then they have another opportunity. And now you've got this vacuum where you used to rely on this one person and they're not there anymore. And you're trying to teach somebody new. Think about the time, right? The biggest thing you always hear is like training time and retention, right? It's the thing that restaurants and bars just churn through because you have a lot of people in the building. When you have more people, they're going to have life happen. They're going to have injuries. They're going to have weddings. They're going to have babies. Like life is going to happen to everybody in the building. We try and just, again, have a very clean deliverable that it's not just me. I'm not doing this alone, but my team that knows you continues to do it. And then if I just had an employee move on to a new opportunity, but she spent 2 weeks with her client set with the new managers, talking about processes, talking about the uniqueness. And so for me, I think where we're headed is, I think that I see AI as a huge support tool for my employees to free up their time so that they can become even more kind of intimate and connected with their clients.
Do you find yourself using it at all, like the GPT or anything like that, like throughout your day?
I haven't been doing, I probably should, because I'm not a good emailer. Like I'm much better like this. So not on the AI piece. I mean, there is some AI stuff in the space, as we know. We have a mutual acquaintance / new friend.
He's been on the show.
Oh, okay, yeah. So Jordan Silverman from Starfish.
Shout out to Starfish.
In a very weird kind of, collective consciousness synchronicity. I think I met you, and then I met him the next day.
Yeah. By the way, what he's doing, Jordan Silverman, he used to be at this company called Market Man, and now he has started this called Starfish. First time I saw it, I was like, oh shit, I wonder if accounting software might become obsolete at some point if you can like automate P&Ls
Well,
dynamically based on your,
again, I mean, yes. The answer to that is yes. At some point, like I said, the blocking and tackling will happen. But what you hear on it, whether it's like the slow productivity from like Kel, can't remember his last name. You hear this a lot though. It's like, that's not doom and gloom.
Yeah.
What it means is it's going to free up people like Genuine Article, like my employees, to either aggregate more client information under a philosophical umbrella, and or connect more and educate and teach what we're doing and how we're doing it. And so it's like it's the freeing up of the time, and that resource is the one that is finite. And so all that data is always going to have to be looked at and scrubbed, right? Trash in equals trash out. And if you don't have good processes and if you don't have good training, you're always going to be struggling to get a clear picture.
Yeah, no, I think with all of these things with AI and specifically with these things in sort of the accounting space, it shifts everything from being task driven and tactical to being more results driven and strategic.
Yeah.
You can just spend way more time on like, strategically what are the right, decisions as opposed to spending time on like building these.
Right. But, I've got 2 kids, right? And so, I mean, part of my fear is that sometimes, and I think that maybe my story says this a little bit, is that the tactical pragmatic is the foundation that builds good strategic. And so it's like, it's like you don't want to skip the line. Like sometimes you kind of have to go through to get to the destination, and I think that's what I'm sensitive to. That's the only fear I have, is people jumping ahead and then not really understanding what goes into it and why that matters. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's a balance. Like anything, we just got to keep talking to each other and meeting good people like yourself and working together and trying to make it better. Because ultimately, like I said, going back to what I fell in love with about the industry is taking care of people. That's how you change the world.
Yeah, man. Well, this was awesome. I hate to ask this, but just because we spent a lot of time on a lot of things, any parting advice for people that might be struggling with their with profitability of their business? What's like the right next step?
Don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be scared. Money is just like food transfers emotions, right? I always believe that, you could, taste the love in your favorite dish that your mom makes. Money has a lot of emotions that you don't know where the emotions come from. And fear is a big one. There's a lot of people that are scared to look at, I mean, they'll like one eye open the bank account.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, don't be like, face it with friends, face it with people that you trust. I mean, just ask for help and start to engage with it in any way.
Yeah.
And because if you can face it, then you can fight it. If you know it, if it's accurate, now you can make a decision. And today, it's like the next table is the opportunity. Like, the next ticket is the next opportunity. So I know I'm sounding very kind of coachy and very, grandiose maybe. And if you know me, you've turned this off a long time ago because you're like, Stubbs is on one. But no, I mean, I do truly feel that, and it makes me emotional and it makes me happy and excited, because it's like, it can be done. It can be done. And it may be that the decision is it's time to move on and try something else. And that's okay too. Like, restaurants can fail. It's not the end of the world. It's, it doesn't define you as a person, but you just want to make that decision, open, close, pivot concepts, just with some support and trustworthy information. Just face it, ask for help. It's like what Mr. Rogers said, like, find the helpers.
Yeah. I mean, it really is. I know it sounds surface level, but it isn't. Like, before it's too late. just go in eyes open about what's going on, because it is a tough business. And I think that's what, I think what we'll leave with here is, again, that's another thing that I really appreciated when we first met was, with Me's, our mission is to help people be creative and profitable. And those are two typically opposing things. And that sucks. And I think that far more people can be both. And it's a great first step is go, have an honest look at your business and just start making whatever change and get whatever help you can.
Well, and you'll be shocked and surprised, right? It's like, understanding who you spend who do you send most of your money to from a purveyor standpoint, and going to the sales rep and saying, you know what, it's been a bad year. Like, we're struggling, what can we do? Can we look at our purchase history? Can we, are there rebates, or is there a product that we don't know about that would replace this product and it's half the cost? I mean, and they could be like, oh yeah, as a matter of fact, we just brought on a new supplier and we love this product and we're running a promo, and, the first $2,500 is, comped. And you're like, oh, okay, great. And so now all of a sudden you save $2,500.
Yep.
And then you get to go sell that for $7,500. And it's like, and now we're cooking, and it's just like, it's just a snowball. Just find the pebbles and start it rolling, and it will gain momentum.
All right. Ask for help. We'll leave it at that. I appreciate it, man. Thanks for tuning into the Me's podcast. The music from the show is a remix of the song Art Mirror by an old friend, hip-hop artist, Fresh Daily. For show notes and more, visit getmees.com/podcast. That's GETMEEZ.com/podcast. If you enjoyed the show, I'd love it if you can share it with fellow entrepreneurs and culinary pros, and give us a 5-star rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. Keep innovating, don't settle, make today a little bit better than yesterday, and remember, it's impossible for us to learn what we think we already know. See you next time.